Hi, class. Welcome to the next unit on the Incas. It's our second of three, and we'll go over the economics and society of the Andes and the Inca Empire as a larger group. And so, one thing you'll want to kind of use for your language, I don't know if you remember, you know, Aztec, Nahuatl, Mexica, and those type of things. When I use the word Andes, I'm referring to the broad number of communities over thousands of miles, at least 1,000 miles, throughout the areas we now call part of Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, part of Bolivia, and part of Chile. So it's a broad area geographically. It's not as densely populated as the Aztecs were in the Central Valley of Mexico, but in that larger area, they likewise count in the millions of people. And when I use the word Inca, it will usually refer to when the Cusco Ayu, I'll go over what that is in a bit, has, through conquest, taken over and created an empire. So that's when I will tend to use the word Inca. And one more reminder, I'm not sure if this was in the previous presentation, but from the time period, there was only one Inca, the Sapa Inca. And so calling it Incan culture, Incan religion, like we do today, is a little bit not congruent to what they would have, the words they would have used back then, and that's okay. But just wanted you to know that at the time, the word Inca was reserved for one person. So this is an overview of chapter 6. It's an important overview. It's very important that you watch this and understand it so you can figure out how the Inca situation was operating as well. Just like knowing about the Altepet and the Calpuli and the different parts of that help you to know the Aztec world, knowing the Ayu is the basic unit for in the Andean region. So there would be hundreds of Ayus dispersed along a pretty large area. When we get to the next page, there'll be a map, and we'll again show you all the way from Colombia, Ecuador, and those other countries I mentioned. So the Ayu is the basic community, in the same way that the Altepet was the community, the basic unit of that operated in the Aztec world. Hold on, I got something in my throat. Okay, sorry about that. I got a drink of water. So again, the population estimates have to be done in some creative ways. And in this book that we're reading, it gives you some of the broader numbers. But if you look, 6 to 10 to 12 million is a safe number. By about 1,500, depending on what you're looking at. Now, the Inca Empire, which I'm not talking about right this second, the empire itself was divided into 4 parts called 4 suyus. That will be part of a different presentation. And then within those 4 suyus, they would understand that there were, again, dozens of Ayus in each of those suyus. And so an Ayu, as mentioned, is their basic community. Bullet point number 2 is interesting because an Ayu has many parts. I'm not sure this is well described in your book, in this part of the book at least. So Ayus are not like round circles of land, but they, in fact, an Ayu is a community that would control or utilize land in all sorts of different parts. And some of them could be quite far, but they would still be part of the one Ayu. And one of the reasons that they would have various areas all being part of the Ayu is that each of the areas that I'm going to show you on the next slide could contribute different products to the Ayu. So as you're going to see on the next slide, there'll be coastal and lowlands and others, and different products are grown in different regions. So that's important to help an Ayu function. Also, as a community then, when labor is needed, you can see on the right, for example, there's some extensive capital and labor outlays that you have to use to create the infrastructure for this IU on the right. Those rocks don't just stack up by themselves. If you look to the right, go ahead and look to the right of it where the iStock credit is given, you can see that these are terraced lands, and by flattening out the land and then building the walls and then having it go down and down the hill like that, they're able to turn hill land into arable or farmable land. And so this all takes labor and it takes organization, and it's the IU that provides the labor and provides the organization to create this, which of course then would in turn create production of maize, potatoes, whatever the products might be. And then, as you can see by the last bullet point, the nobles, and the Curaka is the highest of them, he is the leader, then they are in charge of organizing the economy and distributing the goods as well. So this slide is a little awkward, but once I situate it for you, you should be pretty good to go. So the blue to the green to the white to the red is an attempt to kind of look. So if you take the map we're looking at, you can see again Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, all that, where the empire was. And if you could imagine, it's hard to see because you can't see me, but if you could imagine going down to the south and then cutting the geography in half, what you'll find is, maybe it's not working, but here I'm not sure you can see my pointer on that, but on the left side, from the coastal area on the left, which is the west, moving east up into the highlands, and then back down again as you continue to go east, you get down into the tropical zone that you might call the Amazon. And so these are areas that a potential IU could control land. And so in some of their land holdings near the coast, there would be various products and fish that could be produced and provided to the IU as a whole. And then as you leave the coast, which is very dry, by the way, in this part of the world, everywhere south of that bay in Ecuador, then as you go to the lowlands, it would produce different products that you could use, including perhaps livestock like the alpaca. And then, as you can see, the white one, the highlands main portion of the IU, that would certainly be the largest area for most IUs. The most people, the largest area. It's the most productive zone. So as you get up in the highlands, corn and potato production and other goods, but those first two are the main ones. That's where you're going to get the bulk of your production. And then you might have a few, again, satellite zones east of the Andes where tropical goods are produced. And then, again, as you can see in the white square, the nobles and the Curaka especially would all be keeping track of this and managing it, managing production, and distributing all these goods so that the IU can continue. So that's kind of a model of how the IU would operate geographically, and how the nobles and the Curaka would be able to keep track of all that. Here is one leftover site of an IU, and again, I want to point out that if we start at the bottom, looking up, you can see how much labor and capital in the form of quarrying rocks and bringing them there and all that has gone into creating this part of the IU. They have urban buildings at the top, they have urban buildings at the bottom, they're farming on the hill and in other places. You can see that on the top left, we have a picture with a tourist standing by the wall. Again, how elaborate and expensive and how advanced these structures were. I don't happen to know why this one is so large. It would either be a defense wall to help defend the IU, or it would be some sort of religious or secular government building that wants to be grandiose. And so it's kind of, again, just in one spot in the highlands. You can see in the background, right, of the upper right, we're in the middle of the mountains. This is down in the valley where the water runs. And again, they would organize the water runoff so that water would flow to all of these terraces. And so the Ayu, that communal unit stretched out over lots of places, would be in charge of all this. And this is a pretty basic reading from chapter 6, so I don't need to go into great detail, but just a reminder that as you understand how the Ayu is operating socially, the vast majority of the population would be commoners. They're members of the Ayu, and as such, they would have both, they would have obligations to the Ayu, such as labor, and giving up the product that the nobles say they need to give up. But they would also, of course, receive food and other goods because they are members of the Ayu. So the bulk would be involved in, of the commoners would be involved in farming or animal husbandry. That's typically what they did. Again, as a reminder, the Kuraka, it doesn't matter if you spell it with a C or a K. I tend to use the K's, but that's just a personal way I go forward with that. A Kuraka is the leader of any Ayu. The Kuraka of the biggest Ayu, which is in Cusco, would be the Inca. So the Inca is a Kuraka, but there's lots of other Kurakas. And this is a hereditary group, right? And they govern and administer the Ayu. And when you continue reading in the chapter, you'll find that among the nobles, in addition to the Kuraka, there's the Capac Incas, the Wawa Incas, and then the Sapa Inca. And the Sapa Inca is, of course, the main leader at the very top of the empire. And again, to be dramatically correct, at the time, this would be one of the few people Inca was used for, the Sapa Inca. He had, by the way, if you want to identify him in future drawings, he would wear a fringe on his forehead. That was the official symbol of his kingliness, right? And again, in the book, we'll talk about all sorts of different noble groups. But the commoners who are members of the Ayu, kind of like the Masewaltin, who are members of the Altepet and get land and goods, right? They have rights and obligations. The commoners in the Ayu also have rights and obligations. Now, a different class of people are the next ones we're going to, the next four. So that first groups of nobles and commoners is the main Ayu group. But there are others. The Yanacona, is in fact kind of, you'd want to see them as almost servants to the nobles or attached to fields or estates in some way. And so you would want to see them as kind of, they weren't part of the main Ayu group, but they took care of the farm over there in Sprague, Washington, and they made sure that the watermelons were running well. So the Yanaconas did not have the communal ties that the commoners did, but they would work with the Ayu as kind of separated out non-nobles who received a specific position to do a specific thing, and it's usually because they had a skill that they could do it. Again, if you had a very, very large estate in Malibu, California, and there's no way that your family is going to take care of all the gardens and the landscaping, then you might have a permanent Yanacona, and I've just switched to the Inca world, who that would be their job that they could do. Another group that kind of operated outside of the general Ayu community were Akyas. Akyas tend to be more Inca, so when the Cusco sets up the Inca Empire, they become more numerous. And these are women who are being chosen after conquest to be special women in kind of a religious way, and they would be brought to Cusco and be part of the queen's hierarchy. In the picture to the right, you can see at the very top the word Akya, and that's who represents them. The lady at the top is the top female Inca. Her name is Koya, which means moon, and she would be in charge of them. These young women, often called mamaconas as well, would then serve in the large imperial religious hierarchy or become additional wives and concubines of leaders and generals, or could be chosen for special sacrifices that would be done to commemorate the victory of the empire. For example, they could again, we'll just use local places that you might know of. They could take a young girl from Lewiston and bring them back to the Imperial Center. She would go through years of training on what she was supposed to do, and then they would bring her back to where the border was between the Inca Empire and Lewiston, who has now been conquered and added to the Inca Empire. And then she would be slaughtered there in a ritual, a human sacrifice ritual, or buried alive. And that was supposed to carry out some sort of supernatural connection between the two areas. And according to the religion, which we haven't gone into, then there's a good chance that that woman would become partly divine and act as another word I'm not going to give you right now. A specialist in certain trades. It could even be like our Pochteca, our merchants in Valley of Mexico, were called camayos. And so camayos are also kind of they're not part of the main Ayu society, like Yanaconas aren't as well. The Yanacona and the Camayo are exempt from the labor service. And that's going to become big when the Inca Empire takes over Ayus. They're going to exact, in addition to tribute, like the Aztecs, one of the big tributes is going to be labor. And so the Yanaconas, the Akyas, and the Camayos, and the Mitimas were all not subject to the rotary labor demands. Mitimas would be best understood as some foreign group that wasn't part of your Ayu, but who had been settled in, so settlers from a different part of the world or a different Ayu who are supporting your Ayu and are part of it, but they're not part of the main kinship network. And so they also are not obligated. They also don't have the same amount of rights, don't forget. So rights and obligations are very different. So on our pictures to the right, we can see the Akyas. According to one illustrator, we can see a noble. He's working the quipu, which you've learned in different parts. And down below, we can see your average Ayu commoner family planting corn. I will kind of give you a preview, heads up. Notice that the sun is over the man and the moon is over the woman. There's a reason for that, as when we get into the gender and the religion, the Andean construct of reality was overwhelmingly in engendered male and female pairs. So we'll go into that in a different place. The rest of the chapter talks about the life cycle. Again, pretty straightforward for you to see what was going on. There was definitely childbirth was a mostly female experience with midwives involved in the process. There was about a 4-day period of cleansing for the woman and then putting the child into the cradle. There is potential stories about them trying to toughen up the kids and giving the little babies tough love and not giving into their whims. these were not quite sure how true that is. There were puberty rites to gain for boys and for girls. You can see their names, Warechikoi and Chikuchikoi, in the book, in the chapter 6. And then all males and females were expected to be in a heterosexual marriage and continue the process, whether nobles or commoners, of what they would be doing, whether it was in the priesthood, if it would be growing farm, if it was, if you were going to be in charge of organizing one part of the IU, and those types of things. So, you will find that the expectations then, as I've just mentioned, were to follow your family's status and continue the process. And so nobles enjoyed, exemptions from lots of taxes that the commoners weren't, and so on and so forth. Now, the state-owed labor that I've briefly mentioned is called the mita. I don't have it up here, M-I-T-A. You can put an apostrophe after the T if you want, but the mita is this rotary labor where part of the community would be required to serve their IU or to serve the imperial IU moving forward, right? So we don't have a lot of information on the justice system. Like, a lot of the information just didn't make it into the European textual world because of the quipus. But stories handed down and told to Spanish priests tend to demonstrate that governors and curacas kind of were the judges too. So it's not a separate, Supreme Court or anything like that. And they do tell the Spanish, kind of like we heard in the Aztec stories, about how severe punishment was, and that death penalty was very common. So, yeah, that's kind of this quick version, 20 minutes or so, of this. If you go to 2.1, we're going to look at the economic structural elements as well. Be ready to understand all this in the chapter when I meet with you next. Bye.